There's a book that was considered scripture for thousands of years, a book that the earliest Christians quoted, a book that was referenced in the Bible itself, and then, suddenly, it vanished. Church councils met in secret and decided that this text was too dangerous for ordinary people to read. They removed it from the canon. They stopped copying it, and for over 1,000 years in the Western world, it was lost, hidden, forbidden. We're talking about the Book of Enoch, and when you read what's actually in it, you'll understand exactly why the most powerful religious institutions on earth wanted it buried. Because this book doesn't just challenge the official story, it completely demolishes it. It talks about things that weren't supposed to be possible, events that weren't supposed to have happened, and beings that weren't supposed to exist. So buckle up, because what I'm about to share with you is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about human history, about religion, and about what's really been going on since the beginning. Let's start with the basics. Who was Enoch? According to Genesis, Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah. The Bible says something strange about him. It says he walked with God, and then he was not, for God took him. That's it. Most biblical figures died. Abraham died. Moses died. But Enoch? He just vanished. Taken directly by God at age 365. That's already weird. But here's what's even weirder. There's an entire book attributed to Enoch that goes into massive detail about what he saw, where he went, and what he learned during his time walking with God. And for centuries, it was considered divinely inspired scripture. Early church fathers like Tertullian, Irenaeus, and Clement of Alexandria quoted from the Book of Enoch as authoritative text. The Epistle of Jude in the New Testament directly quotes Enoch, not hints at it, not alludes to it, directly quotes it by name. Jude 14 and 15 are word for word from the Book of Enoch. That means the writers of the New Testament considered it legitimate. They considered it true. So what happened? Why did it disappear? Around the 4th century, councils of bishops started determining what books would be in the official Bible and what books wouldn't. The Council of Laodicea, the councils that produced the final canon, and the Book of Enoch didn't make the cut. The official reason? It was deemed non-canonical, too controversial, difficult to authenticate. But when you read what's actually in it, you realize the real reason. It was too specific, too detailed, too dangerous to the narrative the church was trying to build. For over 1,000 years, the Book of Enoch existed only in fragments and references. People knew it had existed, but the full text was gone from Europe and the Middle East. Then in the 1700s, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce traveled to Ethiopia, and there, he found something shocking. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church had preserved the Book of Enoch. They never removed it from their Bible. They'd been reading it, copying it, and teaching from it the entire time. Bruce brought back 3 copies to Europe, and suddenly, scholars could read what had been hidden for so long. Then came the big validation. 1947, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Among the hundreds of texts found in those caves were multiple copies of the Book of Enoch in Aramaic and Hebrew, carbon dated to between 300 and 100 BC. That means the Book of Enoch is older than most of the New Testament. It predates Christianity, and it was clearly important because multiple copies were preserved by the Essenes, the Jewish sect that hid the scrolls. You don't make multiple copies of something unless it's critically important. So what's in this book that was so dangerous? Let's start with the Watchers. Chapter 6 of the Book of Enoch describes 200 angels who descended to earth on Mount Hermon. They weren't sent by God. They came on their own. The text says they saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they made a pact. They swore an oath together, and they took human women as wives. This isn't a metaphor. The book gives names. It lists the leaders: Semjaza, Azazel, Armaros, Barakal, Kokabeel. 20 leaders, each commanding 10 angels. 200 total. And here's where it gets really interesting. These watchers didn't just take wives. They taught humanity things we weren't supposed to know. Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and armor. He taught the art of war. Other watchers taught astrology, the signs of the earth, the signs of the sun and moon. They taught enchantments, the cutting of roots, and the knowledge of plants. One taught cosmetics and jewelry. Another taught writing and ink. According to Enoch, civilization wasn't a slow human development. It was taught to us by beings from somewhere else. Now, let's pause here. Does this sound familiar? If you know anything about Sumerian texts, alarm bells should be ringing. The Sumerian texts talk about the Anunnaki, beings who came from the heavens and taught humanity agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, and metallurgy. The Sumerian king list talks about rulers who reigned for thousands of years before the flood. And the Sumerian creation myths talk about these beings mixing their essence with primitive humans to create a worker race. Different culture, different language, same story, but it gets darker. The Book of Enoch says the Watchers didn't just teach forbidden knowledge. They had children with human women, and those children were giants, the Nephilim. The text describes them as 3,000 ells tall. Now, an ell is about 18 inches. So we're talking beings that were potentially hundreds of feet tall according to some translations, though scholars debate whether that's literal or exaggerated. But even conservative interpretations put them at 10 to 15 feet tall. Giants. And these giants were wrong. The book says they consumed all the resources of mankind. When humans couldn't sustain them anymore, the giants turned against humanity. They began to devour people. They sinned against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish. The earth became corrupted. Violence and perversion spread everywhere, and humanity cried out to heaven for help. Chapter 9 describes 4 archangels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, going before God and reporting what was happening on earth. They say the whole earth has been filled with blood and wickedness because of what the Watchers have done. And God responds. He tells them the flood is coming. He tells them to warn Noah, and he gives specific instructions on what to do with the Watchers and their offspring. The Nephilim are to destroy each other. The archangels are to instigate war among them so they kill each other off. The Watchers are to be bound. The text says Azazel is to be cast into darkness, into the desert, into a place of sharp and jagged rocks. He's to be bound there until the day of judgment. The other Watchers are similarly imprisoned in various locations within the earth. And here's the key phrase: bound until 70 generations. 70 generations until they're released for the final judgment. Now, let's do some math. If a generation is roughly 40 years, 70 generations is 2,800 years. If the flood happened around 3000 BC, which some researchers place it, then 2,800 years later puts you right around 200 BC. Coincidentally, that's right when the Dead Sea Scrolls were being written. Right when there was an explosion of apocalyptic literature and messianic expectation in Judea. Were the people of that time expecting something? Were they calculating timelines based on texts like Enoch? But here's what really makes the church uncomfortable. The Book of Enoch gives Enoch himself a cosmic tour. He's taken through the heavens. He sees the storehouses of the stars. He sees where the spirits of the dead are kept. He sees the tree of life. He sees the throne of God described in terms that sound more like advanced technology than clouds and harps. He talks about wheels within wheels, living creatures with multiple faces, and structures made of crystal and fire. Chapters 72 through 82 is called the Book of the Luminaries. It's an astronomical text. Enoch describes in detail the movements of the sun, the moon, and the stars. He gives a 364-day calendar based on solar cycles. He describes the paths of celestial bodies with precision that a Bronze Age person shouldn't have. He talks about gates in the heavens through which the sun rises and sets at different times of the year. This is sophisticated astronomical knowledge written down thousands of years ago. And then there's the prophecy section. Enoch describes the flood in advance. He tells Noah it's coming and why. He describes the cleansing of the earth. But he also describes what comes after. He talks about a future time when wickedness will return, when the Watchers or their influence will come back, when there will be a final judgment. And he describes signs, wars, earthquakes, celestial disturbances, moral decay. Sound familiar? It's the same apocalyptic imagery you find in Revelation, in Daniel, in the words of Jesus about the end times. Here's where it connects to other ancient texts in a way that's undeniable. The Sumerian texts talk about the Anunnaki coming to Earth to mine gold. They talk about creating humans by mixing their genes with primitive hominids. The Anunnaki had children with human women, creating a hybrid bloodline. Kings claim descent from these beings. The parallels to the Watchers and Nephilim are exact. Different names, same story. The Egyptian texts talk about the Neteru, the gods who ruled before the pharaohs. They talk about a time when gods walked among men and taught civilization. The Indian Vedas talk about the Devas and the wars in heaven. They describe flying machines called Vimanas and weapons that sound like nuclear explosions. The Mahabharata describes a war so devastating it reshaped the world. Same themes. Greek mythology talks about the Titans and the Olympians, about heroes who were half god, half human. Perseus, Hercules, Achilles, demigods, Nephilim by another name. And the Greeks said these beings existed before the flood, before the age of men. The Bible itself references the Nephilim in Genesis 6. It says there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men. It's right there in Genesis. But Genesis gives you 2 verses. Enoch gives you the full story. So why was this banned? Think about what this book claims. It claims angels rebelled not just in heaven, but came to earth. It claims they physically interbred with humans. It claims they taught humanity knowledge that God didn't want us to have. Yet, it claims our civilization is built on forbidden knowledge from non-human beings. And it claims those beings are still bound somewhere in the earth, waiting for a specific time to be released. That's a massive problem for church doctrine. If angels can physically reproduce with humans, that raises questions about the nature of angels, the nature of humans, and the nature of Jesus, who Christians believe was both divine and human. If civilization was given to us rather than developed by us, that changes the entire narrative of human progress and divine plan. If there are beings bound in the earth waiting to be released, that implies events are following a script, a timeline that's out of human control. The Book of Enoch also gives too much detail about the structure of heaven and the cosmos. It demystifies things the church wanted to keep mysterious. It presents a universe that's vast, structured, and operates according to laws and schedules. That's harder to control than vague promises of heaven and threats of hell. When you give people specific knowledge, they start asking specific questions. And questions are dangerous to institutions built on faith and obedience. There's also the uncomfortable fact that Enoch was taken to heaven without dying. That means a human, not Jesus, achieved what Christianity claims only Jesus achieved. The church needed Jesus to be unique, the only bridge between God and man. But here's Enoch, pre-flood, walking with God and being taken directly to heaven. That's a theological problem. And let's talk about the flood itself. The Book of Enoch makes it clear the flood wasn't because humans were generally wicked. It was a specific response to genetic corruption. The Nephilim were hybrids, corrupted genetics. The text implies that if this had continued, humanity would have ceased to be fully human. The flood was a reset, a cleansing of corrupted DNA. Noah's family was chosen because their bloodline was pure. Genesis says Noah was perfect in his generations, not morally perfect, perfect in his lineage, genetically uncorrupted. If that's true, it implies God cares about human genetics remaining human. It implies there's something specific about human DNA that's important. And it implies the threat of genetic manipulation isn't just ancient history. It's a recurring danger. That's a conversation the church in the 4th century didn't want people having. And it's a conversation modern institutions still don't want people having. Here's another bombshell. The Book of Enoch describes multiple heavens. Enoch is taken through different levels of reality, different dimensions, if you will. He describes areas where certain types of spirits are kept, where fallen angels are bound, where righteous souls await resurrection. This is a complex cosmology. It's not the simple heaven and hell binary that makes for easy control. It's a universe with layers, rules, and different categories of beings all interacting in ways we don't fully understand. When the text was rediscovered and scholars started analyzing it, something else became clear. The astronomical information is accurate. The calendar system works. The descriptions of solar and lunar cycles match what we know about celestial mechanics. How did ancient people have this knowledge? The text itself says it was taught by the Watchers, forbidden knowledge from non-human intelligence. And here's something that keeps me up at night. The Book of Enoch says the Watchers are bound for 70 generations, not destroyed, bound. That means they still exist. And if you calculate 70 generations from the flood, depending on when you date it, we're either past that point or very close to it. The text says they'll be released for the final judgment. What does that mean? What happens when beings that were imprisoned for thousands of years are let loose? Modern UFO researchers have noticed something interesting. The descriptions in Enoch of beings descending from the sky, taking humans, teaching knowledge, and creating hybrids sound a lot like modern abduction accounts. Beings from the sky, genetic experiments, hybrid children, teaching advanced knowledge. Is it possible we're not dealing with something new, but something very old that's been interacting with humanity in cycles? The Book of Enoch also describes Enoch's role as a scribe. He's told to write everything down, to preserve the knowledge, to make sure future generations know what happened and what's coming. Why? Because the beings orchestrating events know that memory fades. History gets rewritten. But if you encode the truth in religious texts, in mythology, in stone, some of it survives. Some of it gets passed down. And when the time is right, people will rediscover it and understand. That's exactly what's happening now. Texts that were hidden are being found. Languages that were dead are being translated. And people are connecting dots across cultures and realizing the stories match. The Watchers, the Anunnaki, the Neteru, they're the same beings. The Nephilim, the demigods, the Titans, same hybrids. The flood, the cataclysm, the reset, same event. Different cultures preserving pieces of the same true history. The establishment, both religious and academic, fights this tooth and nail. They call it pseudoscience. They call it myth. They say it's not literal. But when multiple independent sources separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years tell the same story, at what point do you admit there's something to it? At what point does the pattern become undeniable? The Book of Enoch was banned because it told too much truth. It gave too much detail. It made the unseen seen and the mysterious understandable. And that threatens control. Every power structure relies on information asymmetry. They know things you don't. But when you read Enoch, you know what they know. You see the bigger picture, and you start asking questions they don't want to answer. If angels rebelled and came to Earth, could it happen again? If genetics were corrupted once, could it happen again? If civilization was taught rather than developed, who's teaching us now? If the flood was a response to corruption, what happens when corruption reaches that level again? These aren't abstract theological questions. These are practical questions about what's happening right now in our world. Genetic engineering, transhumanism, AI. We're playing with the same fire the Watchers brought, and we're being told it's progress. The Book of Enoch warns us. It says this has happened before. It says there are consequences. It says there's a timeline, and judgment is coming. And we're going to expose all of it. The truth has been buried for thousands of years, but it's coming out. And every person who learns it, who shares it, who refuses to accept the approved narrative, that's one more light in the darkness. The Watchers may have taught forbidden knowledge, but knowledge itself isn't the enemy. Ignorance is. Subscribe, wake up, and let's find out together what else they've been hiding.